Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.
Cruising your way next, Off 90. We talked to a Vietnam vet about his experiences during the war. Meet the organizers behind a tiny but mighty theater troupe. Yes, Virginia, there is a broom artist. Plus, the fascinating history of a southeastern Minnesota cemetery. Your next stop, Off 90. Hi, I'm Barbara Keith. Thanks for joining me on this journey off 90. Gerald Matheis grew up on a farm in Iowa. Shortly after graduating from high school, he was drafted and served our country fighting in Vietnam. We talked to Gerald about his experiences in Vietnam and what it was like to return to the quiet Midwest after such a tumultuous experience.
The man at the front, ultimately, who gets the job done.
We went to basic training at Fort Riley, Kansas. They lined us all up out there, and the big general come out and he says, "You boys are going to Vietnam and some of you ain't coming home." My name is Gerald Joseph Matheis. I got drafted in May of '66, got out in May of '68. We trained for 6 months at Fort Riley, Kansas. They shipped us to California by train. We got on a ship, went to Vietnam on a ship. Most people went by plane as replacements. We went as a unit. We formed up the original 9th Division over there. After 12 days, we stopped in Okinawa. They turned 4,000 troops loose and said, "Be back in 6 hours." After you've been on the sea for 12 days. Well, they had them all back in 8. We had to go get some of them. But anyway, one day out of Okinawa, the middle of the night, midnight, the MPs were chasing a guy up the galley, up the steps. He got up on top and says, "I can't go," and he jumped overboard. He didn't go to Vietnam. We circled for a day and a half, we didn't see him. And then we headed for Vietnam. And then they put us on trucks and we went to our base camp and there was a big pile of tents out there and he says, "There's your tent. If you want to sleep under it, you better put it up." So the first weeks over there, we just sent it out on light patrols and stuff just to get us acquainted to the territory. And it's hotter than the dickens and you know, it's just crazy. Smell was terrible. And we went on a few patrols, then we moved down to the Mekong Delta and they formed up the Mobile Riverine Force, which was the Navy Army. They put us on ships, which was really nice, all air conditioning and showers and everything. And they'd take us out on the armored troop carriers. That's the one with the front ramp to drop that, holds the platoon. They'd drop us off along the waterways down in the swamp, and they'd pick us up 3 days later. You couldn't stay out over 3 days because your feet would get so sore that you'd have to come in and dry out. So we'd go out 3 days, come in for 2, and dry out, and go back out again. And we was always looking for the VC, and we ran into them and they ran into us several times. And our first casualty over there was one of the guys in my platoon got gored by a water buffalo. What happened was we were walking along this tree line and I think the cow had a calf and he got spooked and he had this guy on the ground, pinned him to the ground. We had to shoot the buffalo to get him off of us. And the next day we got shot at from the farmer because he was mad because we shot his water buffalo. But then we did all kinds of patrols and everything. We'd bring in VC and suspects and all that kind of stuff. And what this Mobile Riverine Force does, they go up and down the rivers and patrol them, and we'd walk the rice paddies alongside of them. We were in waist-deep water and knee-deep mud most of the time. That's just the way it was, because it's all swamp. The 19th of June, 1967, we were on patrol. I was in B Company, and we were on patrol. We were bringing in suspects and stuff like that. And our A Company, we could hear some firing over to our front and right. And we found out that our A Company was up there and got in trouble, and we had to go get them out of that mess. So we went up there and got alongside of them, and they got caught in a crossfire between two 50 caliber machine guns. They lost 25 dead right now out of a company. I laid in a solid mud for 4 hours, couldn't go nowhere, just lay there until it got dark. And then we got back into this little ravine, and you could hear guys out there crying and, you know, just screaming because they were wounded and couldn't go nowhere. So they wanted 4 of us to go out there and bring some of those guys back. Well, we took poncho liners. We went out there, we brought 5 or 6 guys back. We didn't know if they were alive or dead or who they were or anything. But that was kind of hairy. You know, you didn't know. We could have got shot pretty easy going out there, but we made it through that. And then the next day we patrolled the thing and walked through the whole area. They were gone, they left. Supposedly we killed 256 of them that day. And out of 4 companies, we lost 52 guys killed. A company that got caught in the crossfire had 9 guys that walked away from it out of 120. Only 9 of them walked away that didn't get wounded or killed. And I'm in touch with one of them up in the Twin Cities that walked away from it. How I got to know him is his niece married my nephew. So that's how it all come about. But then in September of '67, I got transferred into a different unit because we went over as a unit and they didn't want us all transferring home out of the same unit at the same time. So they shipped some of us to a different unit, so they then brought in new ones. So there'd be people there. They sent me, I got out of the infantry walking and I got into gun jeeps. We patrolled an 8-mile dirt road all the way out to the highway, from the base camp to the highway. The minesweepers would clean it every morning, walked with the minesweepers. We'd follow them, and then when they get done, we'd keep it open all day. And at night, we'd turn it right back to the VC again. They'd find mines in the road all the time, and the engineers would blow them up. They'd bring a load of dirt in, fill it up, and away we go. I left Vietnam on the 6th of January, 1968. Well, another thing, I left Vietnam, it was probably 90 to 100 degrees. Got to San Francisco, it was 46. Got to the Twin Cities, it was 20 below, all in 24 hours. I spent a year and 11 months in the Army, and then went home and started farming with my dad. Nowadays, every time somebody sees you wear this hat, they shake your hand and thanks for your service and all kinds of stuff. We get all kinds of recognition now, which we didn't get before. And these guys that come from Iraq and stuff now, they say they thank us for starting that. So they get all the appreciation. You know, they get welcomed home and all kinds of stuff, which we didn't get. But now, the more you bring it out, the better it is. The more I talk about it, the better it is for me to take care of my 50% PTSD.
The Matchbox Children's Theater of Austin, Minnesota has been around for over 4 decades. Their mission is to spark imaginations by presenting professional quality children's theater on a consistent basis. Attend one of their productions and you just might be pleasantly surprised by what you see.
But it's the largest wardrobe I've ever seen. I want to take a closer look at it.
Come on, Ed.
I'd rather go explore outside.
Matchbox Children's Theater does lots of shows with animals, so we're going to back into this areas where various animals on both sides are. Everything from dragons to wolves to pigs to lions and tigers and bears.
Does that feel about right?
Yep.
That feels right, doesn't it? Yeah, that feels really good.
Isaac is going to be the white stag in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Well, once he gets a hat, a hood with the white stag antlers.
Figured I didn't break the seam in my pants, so we're good tonight.
This is fun for me to do this because I have 4 little boys.
My name is Leah Culbert, and I play Jadis the White Witch in Matchbox Children's Theater's production of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I had already done several shows by the time I had read the Chronicles of Narnia. I did my first Matchbox show when I was 9 years old. And I had seen my first Matchbox production in the basement of Queen of Angels Church in probably 1975.
What are you doing out so early?
I was trying to catch the white stag, but I missed him again.
Oh, don't give up. If you catch the white stag, bring you good fortune.
I know.
In 1975, a gentleman named Bill Libby and I were both working at Boston Park and Recreation Department under a CETA grant, and came up with the idea, because we both had theater backgrounds, to start a children's theater company. Budget cuts happened and we were low on the totem pole, so Matchbox got cut, but we'd already done a show that got very good audience response. We did Sleeping Beauty or the famous Rose Taboo, and there was enough public support where they said, hey, we want to keep this going.
Right now the audience can see your thinking, so you just have to get comfortable with that by going through it.
True. Tell me, Edmund, my dear son of Adam, are there any more of you? Humans, I mean, in these parts?
Yes, my sister Lucy.
What? I started when I was 9, so I was around adults a lot, and they were very patient with me, and they taught me how to be on stage, and they taught me how to be backstage, and they taught me a craft that I could take no matter where I go in the world.
So, keep your movement.
So Regner's, the former Regner's Dry Cleaners, is where we are right now. Where's that little, oh, here's the switch. So this one gives us some nice ability to pull from both sides of the rack. But the other one doesn't work, so you have to crawl in and...
I don't think you want just a plain white one, do you?
No, not
Did you check
not unless we can layer it with a vest.
Did you check the Christmas racks?
We have like a little George Washington. The big George Washingtons are all rented out right now. We rent to schools like Alden and Gray Meadow, Hayfield, Northfield. Well, we have a skunk here, and we also have like wolves and monkeys and pigs and tigers and Winnie the Pooh.
Maybe there is something to be done about it.
Oh, what's that, Mr. Centaur?
We can hope and pray that our king will soon return.
Being in the Paramount really enhances our shows. Kids of all ages, so adults get into it too, are just mesmerized by the place they're in. And then they come and see some magical play. It's just an incredible experience. One of our favorite stories is a little boy was at a show with his dad, and the lights came down, and the little boy said to his dad, once the play started, "When did we go outside?" Which is exactly the feeling we're supposed to get in the Paramount, because you're supposed to feel like you're in the courtyard of a Spanish village under a starry sky. So it's like, yes.
I first did this role in 1985. I was 15 years old, and I auditioned. I would go probably for several seasons doing all 3 shows at the time for Matchbox. So I, was accustomed to just auditioning for plays and taking the roles that I got, and I was cast as the White Witch. And this year, it was a little bit more personal for me because of the death of someone who was important to me growing up, and that's Steve Kinney, who directed me in the first season that we did this.
Not know the Queen of Narnia!
But he asked me to do that role on roller skates. So I performed the role completely on roller skates, which was fantastic. Probably one of the most exciting things that I've done on stage.
Federico, chief of my secret police.
And I was feeling sad and wanting to be in an environment that I was comfortable with and reminded me of all the great things that I had experienced and learned growing up in theater. Not many communities have something like this, where kids can be involved, they can be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. They can learn a craft and a skill that they might pursue professionally, or it might just be something that they do to enrich their own lives through college and into adulthood. So, and to have the ability to have this beautiful theater, centrally located, people can walk to see a show. These are fresh faces that think that I've never been in a play before. So I've had a few saying, oh, well, this means stage left and this means stage right. And I'm like, thank you so much. Just, because it's important for them to let themselves feel like they're doing something. And there's bathrooms downstairs. I'm like, I know that because I was married here 18 years ago.
It's the energy of live theater and the interaction with the audience that's so unique. Our mission is to spark imaginations, so we keep doing it.
Chris Nibbe from Rochester is a broom artist. Several years ago, Chris just became enchanted by the process of making his own brooms. Since then, it has become his life's passion. Chris likes to imbue each of the brooms he creates with originality. This led someone to remark once that Chris is a broom artist, a label he bears with pride.
So this wall, this installation of my brooms, is an example of me not having a style. It's all these different crazy brooms, so I call it restless. This is my restless sweeping wall. I use all sorts of manner of tools. This is a latch hook. My name is Chris Nibbe, and I'm a broom artist. It was about last year when I was showing my brooms at the Living History Fair, someone stopped by and told me I need to be a broom artist, not just a broom maker or demonstrator. And the term broom artist is starting to grow on me. One of my first brooms that I put on a stick for a house broom is this one. I had never made a house broom before. I was never shown how to make a house broom. I just kind of went with it. I have a background in architectural design for the last 25 years, and the way brooms are assembled, it's kind of like a building detail. There's more to it than meets the eye. What you see on the outside is just a small portion of what you, on the road to how it gets to be a broom. I don't know if I'd go so far as to call myself a broom architect. I guess if I did a lot of broom drawings, maybe I'd be called a broom architect then. So this is a wing broom with a little twist or a bend or whatever you want to call it. I like to play with not only different shapes of the fiber, but I will play with different materials. Wire is a very common hand tying material if you can pull tight enough. My wife says I have a much better focus when I'm talking and making. It helps to clarify my thought process. I don't do painting, but the straw and the string and the imagination are my brush, paint, and palette. And this is, to the best of my knowledge, my original design of a non-stitched flat corn broom. So are my brooms useful or decorative? That is a very common question that I'm asked. People come up and ask, so are these meant to be used? Yes, except for a couple examples of purely art brooms. They're meant to be used. It's another reason I really like this, and especially with the really, really fancy brooms, is it can be useful art. It's just a lot of fun seeing people's look of horror when you grab this really nice looking broom and then start sweeping up the dust bunnies with it. They're just, what? It's too pretty to use. It's like, well, it's meant to be used. That's one of the goofy things about Rochester is you can live here for so long and still find surprises in town. I've only discovered the creative circles within the last year of Rochester. I am fortunate to be a part of this Gallery 24 collective and so many people that want to share their art and just spread the word, but it's in its infancy. I mean, we're just starting to realize how many of us are in town and that, hey, it can be fun to work together. And that's it. We have a wand broom and a good fly swatter. When I first got into making the brooms, I was doing these demonstrations in 2013, 2014, and the reaction was, "You make these? Sweet." There's so many things a broom and the broom fiber can do. What can be done? I have no idea when that question will be answered.
Woodlawn Cemetery lies across Highway 61 from Winona. It was started in 1862 and through the years has become part of a rich heritage. Woodlawn has many noteworthy residents, such as Stephen Taylor, the only Revolutionary War soldier buried in Minnesota, and John Latch, who was responsible for preserving much of the land around Winona. Here's a little more about the cemetery.
The Winona Cemetery Association was organized in May of 1862 by E.D. Williams and other trustees at the behest of the Winona City Council, and they purchased 40 acres of land in Thompson's Valley for $600. The property was soon platted and laid out by Mr. Hilbert, with the first official burial, that of John Lowe, taking place in October of 1862. Grading and terracing work continued at the new cemetery, and by the following spring, Winona citizens were encouraged to visit the cemetery for a picnic. The association began to offer lots for sale a year after the cemetery was organized. With the new cemetery in place, the Winona City Council passed an ordinance prohibiting burial within the city limits, and that all previous burials must be transferred to the new cemetery. Woodlawn Cemetery was designed as an arboretum, and numerous trees, including some exotic species, were planted. Since it was laid out in a narrow valley, the burial plots were graded along the sides of the valley, and numerous stairways were installed between the roadways. Over the years, 12 private mausoleums were built, the first in 1870 by Mrs. Brown. In 1875, a receiving vault was built by the cemetery, and it was replaced in 1884. In 1896, the main entrance of the cemetery was moved and a gate was installed. Woodlawn Cemetery has some interesting features on its grounds. A fort, dedicated in 1933, surrounds the grave of Stephen Taylor, the only Revolutionary soldier buried west of the Mississippi River. Two others are the Laird family Tree of Life sculpture that was donated and installed in 2001, and the chapel-like J.R. Watkins Mausoleum, which was built in 1902. In 1999, the Winona County Historical Society began its Voices of the Past program at Woodlawn Cemetery. The lives of individuals lying in the cemetery are portrayed near their gravesites by volunteers from the society in order to help people learn more about Winona's historic past. An example of a portrayal was in 2003 at the Hulbert Columns, when actors representing Emily Strayer Hulbert and her mother talked about their lives. This story of the past is brought to you by the Winona County Historical Society.
We've reached the end of this episode's tour Off 90. Thanks for riding along. See you next time, Off 90.
Funding for Off 90 is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.